From stretching their screens for more FOV to discovering secretly overpowered pickaxes, Fortnite pros were always finding ways to get ahead and push the limits of what was possible in the game. And looking back now, it's wild how many of these tricks actually changed the entire competitive scene forever. Starting off, we've got one of the most talked about settings of all time, the colorblind mode, which wasn't even meant for competitive advantage. Originally, it was created to help people with vision differences, but pros instantly realized that if you turned on settings like deuteranope or tritanope and cranked the strength up to 10, you could make the storm nearly transparent, meaning players could see straight through it and take fights that others couldn't even react to if you weren't using it. Back then, you were literally putting yourself at a disadvantage. I remember back in those days, people were constantly testing different colorblind modes, comparing which one gave the clearest storm visibility. It became this unspoken meta tweak that everyone relied on to survive longer during endgames. Now, Epic eventually nerfed it to make it more balanced, but for a time it was one of the most game-changing settings ever, right alongside one of the biggest competitive edges ever discovered, stretched resolution. This single tweak completely transformed how Fortnite looked and played, and it was done by simply adjusting the game user settings file. By changing just 2 lines of code, pros could widen their field of view horizontally and vertically, making everything feel faster, smoother, and way easier to track. The most popular ones were 1080, x1080, 1440, x1080, and 1280, x1080, but everyone had their favorite. For me, it was 1080 x 1080, because it felt like having an actual FOV slider built into the game. Your awareness shot through the roof and you could see your character's feet, everything around you, and even track enemies on the sides. So, much easier. But of course, Epic didn't like it one bit, because while it looked stretched and weird for spectators, it also gave PC players a massive advantage. Console players couldn't copy it. And for tournaments like the World Cup, that was a problem, so Epic locked the aspect ratio and ended the stretched res era completely. Even today, though, some players still use it, but it only stretches horizontally now. So your FOV actually gets smaller, not bigger. Still, it gives that nostalgic look and helps FPS a bit, so some players swear by it. But that's nothing compared to when Cosmetics themselves started breaking the game. One of the most infamous examples was the superhero skin, which was way more than just a cool outfit. When it first came out, players found that if you set both your primary and secondary color to the same one, like pure black, you'd become nearly invisible in dark areas at night or in shadows. It got so bad that Epic literally had to remove it from the shop for a while. People even experimented with other colors like gray to blend in with rocks, green for grass and bushes, or blue for water, and it was actually effective. You could sit perfectly still and look like part of the environment eventually. Epic forced a fix so that your primary and secondary color couldn't be the same shade anymore. But even now, gray superhero skins are still really strong in darker biomes. I still see pros using them because they're thin models and naturally harder to hit, but Cosmetics didn't stop there. Pickaxes were just as broken, and some of them were downright ridiculous. Like the Star Wand, which secretly did more damage than intended. Instead of dealing the regular 20 or 50 damage, it was hitting for 56 per swing, and it even had a hidden headshot multiplier, meaning if you had that pickaxe and spawned next to someone with a regular one, you'd win 9 times out of 10. Then came the Codex, which gave players one of the strangest advantages in Fortnite history. When equipped, it gave you a weird speed boost that made your character swing and move faster than normal, and after testing, people found that it wasn't just speed. It also had an extended range, so if you swung at someone, they'd take damage from slightly farther away, meaning if you owned it, you had an unfair lead in every spawn fight. And just when you thought that was wild, the riot baton existed. This thing had a glitch where holding it would completely silence your footsteps, meaning you could sneak up behind players undetected and they wouldn't hear a single step until you were right on top of them. Once the community realized how busted that was, it got patched fast, but it wasn't the last exploit of its kind, because Even gliders got in on the action with one of the most ridiculous ever, the Dragocorn glider. This was the first one where your player actually stood on top of it instead of hanging below. And while that looked cool, the real problem was how it behaved. In mid-air, players noticed that you could spin and twist extremely fast while gliding, making yourself nearly impossible to hit while rotating. It was so broken that it became a must-have item for any sweaty player until Epic nerfed its animation, speed, and made it feel much slower than before. But during its prime, it was one of the most unfair mobility advantages the game had ever seen now. While some of these advantages came from cosmetics, others came purely from movement skill, like crouch, spamming, which sounds simple, but back then it gave you massive control over bloom and made you extremely hard to hit pros, like Mongrail Miter Arrow. And Tfue used this in almost every fight. It was especially noticeable in early game duels when both players landed on one weapon and started spraying the person. Crouch spamming usually came out on top because not only was their aim more stable, but their hitbox kept shifting unpredictably, and for a while some people even thought it was a macro exploit because of how fast players could do it. But in reality, it was just timing and practice. And speaking of aim, one of the most controversial mechanics ever, the legacy aim assist completely dominated controller gameplay for months. This was the version of aim assist where players could repeatedly tap L2 or LT and their crosshair would practically lock onto enemies. It was so strong that controller players were wiping out keyboard and mouse players in close-range fights without even having to perfectly aim themselves. It became a meme, because all you had to do was L2 spam, and the bullets would stick perfectly to your target. It reached a point where entire montages were made, just showcasing people abusing L2 aim assist through bushes and builds shredding health bars instantly. And while Epic eventually replaced it with a more balanced system that scales with movement, the legacy version will always be remembered as one of the most broken yet fun features to ever exist in Fortnite. And it just shows how over time Epic's changes have continuously evolved. The skill gap in the game, because whether it was tweaking settings like colorblind mode, stretching your res, finding invisible skins, overpowered pickaxes, silent footsteps, or just abusing mechanics that weren't meant to exist, pros always found a way to make Fortnite more competitive and more entertaining. And even though most of those advantages are gone now, they still left a mark on the community and the game's entire history. So if you ever see a player using an old stretched resolution or rocking a gray superhero skin, they're probably just chasing that nostalgic feeling from when Fortnite felt wild, unpredictable, and truly broken, and that's what made those early days so special. Anyway, if you enjoyed this look back, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and before you go, check out any of the videos on screen right now because you might just discover even more things pros used to do that changed Fortnite forever.